this is Linda, and our podcast today, I'm really excited to introduce to you a good friend of mine, Amy Ayoub. And I have to tell you real quickly before I introduce Amy how we met. When I joined the nonprofit world about almost 40 years ago, I was amazed at how many times I saw nonprofits being willing to help each other. And then I was so amazed at that concept because I came from the banking world where there was a lot of competition. So when I went into consulting, I thought, okay, Linda, welcome back to the world of competition now. You're going to be competing against other consultants. And 22 years ago, when I moved across the country from Pennsylvania to Nevada, I went to an association of fundraising professionals meeting and introduced myself, the fact that I was moving there and I was going to be doing consulting and I was looking for clients. And the first person who came up to me after that meeting was Amy, and she was another consultant. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's coming to introduce herself to me. And it's even consultants help each other out in this business. So I was just so amazed by that. And that first meeting led to several clients that Amy and I worked on together because we each had different skills and found that we worked well together. So I'm really pleased to introduce to you to Amy Ayoub. And now Amy is making her career, and she's had many career changes. She'll probably tell you a little bit about some of those, but her career now is um, teaching people how to speak in public. And don't start groaning as soon as you hear that, because many people think, oh, well, I'll never be able to do that, or I don't need to do that. But Amy is here to tell you a little bit more about that. So, Amy, I'm going to start with a question. And if you want to say anything more about yourself, feel free to do that. But what do you think people really misunderstand about the whole area of public speaking?
There's a lot of misunderstanding. And I think what they most misunderstand is they aim to, they aim for perfection instead of connection. And when there's a great public speaker, when you walk away thinking they spoke just to me and you start raving about them, that's because they connected with you in some way. And there are techniques to use to make sure you connect. But again, people have to kind of get out of their own way and stop thinking about it being something to impress people. It's all about the connection.
That's really a good point because, those of you who attend church, I know for me, so many times I've gone up to my pastor afterwards and says, that was a great homily. You were speaking directly to me. And I think it's true. And so many people do find that. So that connection is really important. I think if you take one word away from this podcast today, connection is great. But, a couple of years ago, I heard that people fear public speaking more than they fear death. And I found that so astounding because I guess since I've been a teenager, I've loved public speaking. But what do you think is the biggest fear, and why do people have this fear of public speaking?
I don't think it's a fear of public speaking. I think it's a fear of being judged. And there might be some incidences that people had that where they were judged or laughed at, maybe in school or something like that. But we have to regroup and find our confidence and know that we have, if we're being asked to speak or if we're being moved to speak, we have something to share. And when we can take the spotlight off ourselves and put it on the audience, how can I help this audience? What can I share with this audience? It starts taking that fear away. And the judgment that we think is coming from the audience is coming from us. We're projecting what we're judging ourselves on. So self-talk is so important. It's a big part of the classes I teach. There's other techniques, but until we start speaking nicely to ourselves, because we do speak like to ourselves in a way that we would not speak to someone else. We would not let them speak to us. So we have to have those positive affirmations instead of, oh, I'm nervous. No, I'm excited. Instead of, other people are going to know more than me. No, I'm an expert in this. I have something to share. Try to be of service to the audience and it'll take the spotlight away from you.
I think that's so true. I know I had an experience with that myself. I'm an ACFRE, and when I took my oral exam, I thought, well, the people on the panel were also ACFREs, and I felt like I had to talk to them differently than I would speak to another audience, and I failed the first time. And when I went back for the second time, they actually handed me a piece of paper saying, pretend these people don't know anything about fundraising. And it made all the difference in the world. I thought, okay, I'm talking to them like I would talk to someone who doesn't know anything, so I'm not going to be judged by these people. And then I passed, got my ACFRE, but you've been doing this, maybe you can tell us how many years you've been teaching public speaking, but you must have some amazing stories about teaching people how to get over their fear. Do you want to share some of those stories, of course, anonymously, but share some of the stories of people that you've helped?
Yeah, there's nothing better than seeing that aha moment in someone when they have a breakthrough. And I've been doing this 15 years in my own business, but it was like you, it was something I was fascinated with and loved ever since I was a teenager. So I always inserted myself when I could in my fundraising years with the nonprofit leaders or the political candidates that I worked with. I would not write their speeches, but help tweak their speeches, or help tweak the way that they were uh, creating their pitch to, either a donor or uh, the public when they're a candidate. So there's so many stories that, like I said, that aha moment just fills my heart. There was one where someone came through one of my classes, and she had business that she wanted to talk about. She was nervous about speaking, and she was very, again, she was trying to be perfect. That's what she thought made a great speaker. So there wasn't a connection, and she didn't share anything personally. And when I say sharing something personally, I don't mean take necessarily telling your deepest, darkest secret. That could be it, but it's not necessarily that. It's just what's something about yourself that connects to that issue that you are speaking about. And that's what helps you connect. It's the stories. So she went through a couple classes and my writing retreat. And in that writing retreat, she had a little bit of a breakthrough, and she did share something very personal, very traumatic that she went through as a child. And she said, I don't know why I'm sharing this. I don't ever want to talk about this again. It wasn't like she wanted to advocate for that issue or anything. But after that, when she talked about just her business, she told some personal stories of how she got interested in it and things like that. And now part of what she puts on her business card is speaker. So she just broke through that fear totally when she did that. And I believe that happens a lot, Linda, that we have secrets, and they might be something considered very traumatic, some kind of abuse or violence, but it could be something. I have a friend that had shame around not passing the bar exam the first time because he was from a family of politicians and attorneys, and that was shameful to him. I have somebody else that finds herself, being nervous about talking even in conversations because she was cut off so often from her mother and then from her husband when she was speaking. So people carry different shame, and shame is shame. It's your shame. It's not to compare that one's worse than the other. And it's my experience personally and with my clients that when you can get that out, what in a safe place, it might be my class, but it might be with a religious leader, it might be with a therapist, it might be with another friend. When you can say it, you free yourself. And I really believe that a lot of the fear that comes is we're afraid to expose ourselves. Like if I'm too open, that secret's going to pop out. It's a subconscious, of course, I believe that because I've seen that when you do let go of that, even a little bit, you're more likely to share other stories. And I've seen amazing transformations in people from just saying that. I had somebody recently that had been trafficked and had not talked about that to anyone until she met me. She knew my story of being trafficked and shared that with me. She came through my class And I made it clear that she didn't have to share that. She could learn how to speak without sharing any personal story in this class. The classes are small, they're 10 people. And I was amazed. The first class, they don't speak. The second class, they have an opportunity to give a practice presentation. And she told it, and she told it in a way that was so empowering for her and so impactful to the people listening. It was beautiful. And I see that so many times when there's a freedom that comes with it that's unbelievable.
That's pretty amazing. I know I've heard people give speaking engagements that were not really on that topic, but other things that happened in their past that, and it really does make a connection with people, even if you don't have that experience yourself, you tend to want to connect. And I think that word connection, as you said earlier, was so incredible. But
I think, well, for saying that because a lot of people say, I'm not going to tell my story. Nobody's going to connect to that. And we'll take my story, for instance. I felt the same way, like, who's going to care? Why am I telling this? And when, there was a documentary done about my life after that. And when we would go for the screenings and then do a Q&A at the end, I had people come up. There were very few times in the year that we were on the road like that. There were very few times that somebody came up and said that they had also been trafficked. But every time we did it, there was a line of people coming up and sharing something that they hadn't shared. They would say, I haven't told anybody else this, and it might have been, some kind of sexual abuse or violence in the home or domestic abuse or whatever, but they had these secrets. And what we connect on is the shame, right? The secrets.
Mhm.
We all have those.
And I'd like to give people the link to your documentary because when I watched it, even though I've known Amy for years and knew some of her story, I sat and cried like a baby when I watched it. So I definitely advise you to watch that documentary. It's really worthwhile. But you've been working, I don't know how many years you've been working with clients and teaching them how to speak. I know you've worked with government officials and nonprofit leaders and business leaders, but can you tell us what was one of the most surprising results that you've ever seen in your work with clients and maybe tell us a little bit about your clientele?
Yeah, the clientele is so mixed. I have people come in that are really scared. I have people that are nonprofit leaders that are in management and some of the casinos here in Las Vegas that are attorneys. Every walk of life comes in. Some are coming to get over that fear as their main goal, but a lot of them are experienced speakers and they want to be better. And my tagline is be calm, confident, and compelling. And I love to remind people not to mistake being comfortable with being compelling. So some speakers that are really comfortable, right? You've seen them say, oh, I could speak forever. I'm not nervous. If you think, yeah, it feels like you did speak forever. They're just boring because they're too comfortable. So you also want to be compelling. And I do have a lot of experienced speakers coming to me for that reason too. Um, the most surprising, I think just the time, it's not one, it's the times that people that you can see the change, that you can see that moment that they have decided, I'm going to try this, I'm going to use these techniques, I'm going to, be brave and practice this in front of this group. And you see the difference because they get positive feedback and they didn't die, right? They got through it because sometimes they feel it's going to be fatal. But I think like the person I told you about that has that breakthrough that brings out the shame and sees what that you almost see in the moment what that's been doing to you all those years, how it's been holding you back. There was one that was a little different. I saw somebody about a year later after she took a class and she said, oh, I'm so happy I ran into you. I've been wanting to tell you that I haven't spoken in public at all since our speech. So you seem so happy about that. She said, but I got a promotion because I was more confident in the interview. And in my whole life, I'm seeing a difference of my confidence and it's changed my life. And that's really stuck with me because it's not always about, some people say, I'm never going to give a keynote speech, and a lot aren't. But you're probably going to be asked to give a eulogy at some time in your life, or to give a toast at a friend's wedding, or to introduce somebody. There's those times. But even if you aren't, it's the confidence that comes with it that just seeps into other areas of your life. The speaking classes remind me of the fire walks, like Tony Robbins and those guys have do these walking over fire. Well, it's not because you're going to walk over fire that's your goal is to keep walking over fire, just like giving a keynote speech, right? It's to break through some fears, to break through some things that have been holding you back. And I think for the speaking classes, that's what that does too. It helps you, even if you're not going to give a keynote speech, it helps you just in your internal meetings, in your everyday conversations.
I think that's
And to have
a good point because sometimes people think of public speaking as, oh, I have to get up in front of a room of a couple hundred people, where that example you gave us of the woman who got a promotion because she was more confident in an interview, which is a one-on-one, but it's still public speaking. So I think that confidence issue is really, and you mentioned that you were also involved in public speaking from the very beginning, but I'm sure you also learned a lot as you went. So do you think this is a gift that people either have or they can learn?
I definitely think they can learn it. I do. There's techniques, and it takes time, it takes practice. Even, you'll see people go, oh, they're just natural at it. I promise you, they put some work into that. And there might be a natural talent to, like you said, you were comfortable from the time you were a teenager, but I'm sure as the years went on, you also learned ways to make yourself better, not just comfortable doing it, but compelling also. And the people that a lot of times they'll say they don't prepare, they don't write anything out, but they've been thinking of it for weeks. They've formed it in their mind. So that's a mistake people make, is thinking that there's just some people gifted and some aren't. That if you'll learn the techniques and practice them, and you have to prepare. When somebody says, "Oh, I didn't prepare anything," to me, the audience is thinking, "Oh, I wasn't important enough for you to prepare." So or they'll say, one of my favorites is, I don't prepare at all. I just speak from the heart. And I remind them, no, you ramble from the heart. Why don't you prepare? Why don't you prepare from the heart, and then you can speak from the heart? And it's true. And the other thing is, people get complimented. If you don't pass out or throw up on stage, the people in the audience are so afraid of public speaking that they think you're great. So I've had so many people say, oh, I always get compliments. It's yeah, because those people know that they would never do that. They're so afraid. And it doesn't mean that that person isn't good and doesn't deserve some compliments, but not to just rest on that and to really get some expert feedback on it.
And I think that you mentioned if as long as you didn't throw up or faint on stage, but I think all of us who have done public speaking have at some point in time had an embarrassing situation. I think my biggest one was one time I was speaking to a group and the all of a sudden the screen just flipped up in the air. They couldn't see the PowerPoint presentation I was giving them. I'm sure in the years that you've been doing this, you probably have had maybe at least one embarrassing moment. Are you willing to share that with us?
I was trying to forget it like everyone does. It helped me actually, because when you have those moments, you take it into the next one and prepare. You probably check the next screen 1,000 times to make sure
Right.
it's going to happen. There's a couple. One, it wasn't as embarrassing as it was scary, and it wasn't as embarrassing because the audience didn't notice it. But I was introducing a speaker. It was Senator Richard Bryan, who was my idol. He's the reason I got involved in politics. He's still my friend. He's perfect. I just think he's perfection. So I was so excited that I got to introduce him, and it was a women's group of the Chamber of Commerce, which is usually maybe be 100 people at the most. Well, because it was him, he was senator at the time, it drew more, almost 500 people. So we moved it to the showroom at Harrah's Casino. So I'm up on a stage, showroom stage. I prepared, 1,000 times. I was ready for this. I just felt I had the most brilliant introduction for this person. And I got up, and looked at the audience, started talking, and for some reason my knee just started shaking. And it was like I was doing a bad Elvis impersonation on a Vegas stage, And I quickly thought, like, the podium's gonna get knocked over by this. Everybody's gonna see. But because I was prepared, thank goodness, I got through it. Nobody noticed. But that's when I learned some breathing techniques that help physically, because you can be mentally prepared and just something happens physically. But there's breathing techniques that stop those fear-producing chemicals, noradrenaline and epinephrine, that will help that too. So that's the first thing in my classes, that teach them breathing exercises to do that. And you can look them up too, but you could reach out to me for this.
That's really
The
interesting.
the one that was embarrassing that the audience did notice is I went to Toastmasters for a couple years, and Toastmasters is a international group of clubs that help you in your public speaking. They are run by peers. They're run by non-professionals. Some professionals go to it, but they're run by that. So you usually need some more training than that, but it's a great place to learn some things and to get comfortable in front of groups. And I was, pretty confident. I'd been introduced. I made sure I joined groups where I could introduce speakers. So that gave me a little stage time. And this is when I was a financial planner, the time when you were talking about my mini career. So my financial planning time. And one thing on that too is I was a financial planner. When I would do a little seminar about financial planning, I might get one client out of that. But if I would introduce a speaker like I did with Richard Bryan, I put so much work into it that you made it like a little mini speech. I never just read somebody's bio. I would get people coming up to me wanting to do business with me, even though I hadn't talked about my business. It's so fascinating. That's why I urge people to speak anywhere. It doesn't have to be about your nonprofit or about your business. It could be in your church. It could be speaking up for an issue that you advocate for. But people give you credibility instantly if they see you speak, like I said, without throwing up or vomiting or passing out. They do. And then if you are calm, confident, and compelling, it's even more. If there's two real estate people, and you see one speaking with confidence and they're connecting with you, that's who you're going to go with. So I used to get business from that. Anyway, I'm trying to avoid the question of this nightmare. In the Toastmasters clubs, they give you assignments as you go along. You grow. The first speech is an introduction or something. So I'd done my introduction speech, and I don't remember what the second one was, but I decided to perform the Maya Angelou poem, Phenomenal Woman. And it takes a lot of confidence you can't just say that, right? It's very sassy kind of poem for women. And I practiced, memorized, practiced, just was confident. And I got up there and something kicked in. I forgot the second line, and I was mush from then on. And I just kept apologizing. Like, okay, I'm sorry. And in my classes now, that's like a rule. You can't apologize, right? Just keep going on. If you'll breathe, if I would have known what I known then what I know now, just to pause, just to take a breath, because sometimes we're so anxious that the oxygen's not going to our brain. Of course, we're going to forget something. So just those pauses, take a breath, and it will come back to you. But I can't tell you what a nightmare. I must have said, I'm sorry, 10,000 times. I made that audience so uncomfortable. They just wanted me to sit down. So I changed a lot of things after that.
Well, I think it's good for people to know that even the pros are moments, and sometimes, no matter how good you are at this, there's something that you say that, why on earth did I say that? Or I mispronounced the word that I know very well how it's pronounced.
Oh, that does remind me, again, the audience didn't know, but I had that moment I had a speech about trafficking, and it was the first time I was the first time I was giving it. And I had a phrase that I said a couple different times throughout because I wanted it to be memorable. But when I said it this one time and I couldn't remember, I just had this moment. I was like, is that the first time I said it, or am I in this second part? So, and I paused so long, and everybody just thought that I got emotional, which I did for different reasons.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that that was probably 9 years ago, 10 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago. I've been doing this for quite a while. It can still happen. But it's about being prepared and everything that helps you not have that total panic moment or, not be able to go on.
Right. Some of your favorite speakers, I think we all have here speakers that sometimes we think are really boring and sometimes they move us so powerfully. Who are some of the best that you've heard and what makes them that way?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, some of the best I've heard more recently have been my clients because the clients that really put in the work are amazing. It makes such a difference to follow the really simple techniques, just making little tweaks to your speech make a difference. I have a client who's become a friend, Connor Fields. He's a Olympic gold medalist that lives here in Las Vegas. He won the gold medal for BMX in 2016. And he was already good and natural. He's great in interviews. And but he put the same work into his, he decided he wanted to go professional with his speaking. He put in the same type of work, used the same commitment that he did to win that gold medal. And it's amazing. People love him when they hire him. And he then went to, that was in 2016 he won. Then in 2020 it was delayed till 2021 because of COVID. He was the favorite to win, and a bike ran into him and he crashed, and it's like the worst Olympic crash there's been. And he had brain bleeds and so many things. And he came back even stronger. So he has this other story that he has added on to this, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And people just, I actually get business when when he speaks. And then if I'm in the audience and he shares the fact that I worked with him, I get business because he's that good. Somebody would know, no matter what your political beliefs are, President Obama is a fantastic speaker. I firmly believe that he won the first election because of his communication skills. He didn't he didn't have the experience others had. He wasn't that well known, but he connected like crazy. And for some reason, I believe that once he got in as president, there were times that he didn't use those skills, that he let his team guide him too much and he didn't follow his gut feeling. And like with our health insurance, it got to be named Obamacare, where then people that didn't like him thought that that was awful instead of it being, what he had called it in the first place. So the things like that. And he didn't always communicate what was happening. So people made up their own story. And I've seen that in politics before, where sometimes when the team takes over instead of that candidate that has to answer to it, it's not good. But he's brilliant with his storytelling, with his connection, just everything. He's in alignment. What makes you'll know a great speaker if they speak the same way off the stage as they do on stage. It's when somebody tries again to be perfect and tries to impress, and then they come off and they're more casual. You go, well, where was that? Why aren't you like that?
I
So
think
people
that's
should try to be more
very
conversational
true.
about how
Yeah.
he is.
I think just being yourself up there is really, I know when I make presentations in the nonprofit sector, people will often come up and tell me the thing they enjoyed most was the stories I told about clients of mine. Don't reveal their names, but I tell them good stories and bad stories, and they like to hear that. They want to know that you've been through it and experienced it yourself. So I think that's goes back to your word connection. I think if there's one word people take away from
That's
this,
it.
it's connection for sure. But
Yeah, and stories are the best way to do that. Like you said, you don't have to have the same experience, but you still connect. If somebody starts telling a story and saying, when I was 18, we automatically, even if we're not conscious about it, we automatically connect to when we were 18, right? So just storytelling will connect you.
right. Um, Tell us a little bit about your classes. Like how long do people come to a class and what do they learn from that class?
My classes are set up where they're once a month, they're half a day classes, they're once a month for 4 months. And I do that because people have lives, they can't meet every week, and it gives them time in between because to prepare. Because a big part of the classes, the first class is tons of information and techniques and the breathing tools, communication style assessment of our different styles and how they work with each other. There's a lot of information. But the next three classes, there's more information, but the biggest part of those classes are each student gives a 5 to 10 minute presentation on something. So it could be a part, if you have a keynote, it could be just take a little chunk of that and share it. Or you could create, a short speech on anything. It could be your business, but it could also be a hobby. I've learned so many things, how to cook a turkey 3 ways, and how to make Halloween, all these holiday things I've learned. What somebody taught us about hockey this last class. So it could be talking about your hobby. It could be advocating for a charity that you support. It could be anything. It could be a vacation. It's just to start getting comfortable speaking and getting feedback. So the first class will be incorporating one or two of the techniques that I've taught up until then. And then the next time there'll be another technique that you incorporate. And it's only 4 sessions, but it's intense and you learn from each other. So yes, you learn from creating your own speech and getting that feedback, but you learn so much from the other people too. You see what works and what doesn't. We can talk about it, but when you see it, it really helps a lot. And those classes are on Zoom. So I have people from all over that take those. And then I have an advanced class that is in person. I just do that once a year. That is more, there's not that homework to prepare a speech. It's all more extemporaneous. You prepare things in the moment. And it's also once a month for 4 months. And then I have writing retreats that are not really it's not at all the technical part of writing. It's, I want to write, but I just don't seem to be writing. Let me help, can you help me get out of my way? And just sharing the writing. But I call it a writing retreat, but it's really how to get out of your way retreat, get over the fear.
And we'll give people links to all of these classes so they can sign up. But let's suppose somebody's watching this today and they say, oh, boy, I would love to sign up for her class. I think I could learn so much, but I'm scheduled to speak next week at Rotary. What am I going to do? What's your one piece of advice for someone that maybe doesn't have time? They have to do something that's required of their job or something next week. What's one tip you would give them?
Well, technique other than breathing, make sure you're calm. So it could just be a 4 count breath too, in and out of your nostrils. Just uh, breathe in to the count of 4, hold to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 4, hold again, and do that 5 to 10 times. But a technique that will make a difference immediately is starting with a compelling opening. And most people start with pleasantries. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. Blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. If you'll notice the next time you're doing that, or you're in the audience and somebody else is doing that, that's when people are still sending that last text, finishing a conversation over here. And that's why sometimes it's hard to get going. It's hard to get the attention. So if you don't do that, and it's really hard for some people, especially people in nonprofits, a lot are very considerate, compassionate. They want to be nice, nice, nice. So it's hard, but I challenge you to try it. And a compelling opening can be asking a question. It could be giving a statistic that most people won't know. It could go right into a story. Politicians do that. a lot. President Obama would do that a lot, where he'd get up and just start right away with, I just came back from Cleveland, Ohio, where I met Mary Smith, who has 7 children. And you're right in there with him. For me, when I'm giving a presentation, maybe to a Rotary Club or something on speaking, I'll start with asking, raise your hand if you ever get nervous, even a little anxious when you speak. So I'm getting them involved immediately. You will see the difference. Two things happen. They're going, oh, because they're so used to that nonsensical chatter that people do at first. And people do that for two reasons. One, everybody else does it, so they think they're supposed to, which we don't want to be like everybody else. And two, it helps them maybe get going. Like, I want you to like me. Hi, thanks for having me. You're going to do exercises and breathing exercises, and you're going to be prepared. You don't need that to get going. You're already going to be ready. So when you'll notice two things: that their attention is there right away because it's something they're not used to, and you're connected in a way that you've never been connected like before at that beginning. So it gives you more confidence. And you've also prepared that beginning. You're not just kind of, going, oh, thanks. So I would say a compelling opening.
Hey, that's a great tip. I think that's so true because those are the speeches that you remember when somebody opens with a story or even
Right.
a joke or a question. It's something that you remember for a long time. Do you think that to be a good public speaker, you have to be an extrovert? I know a lot of people say, well, I'm introverted. I can never do this. So what advice would you have for those introverts who want to do it or are compelled to do it, but they think they aren't capable?
Yeah, absolutely not. There's many people that I've heard that are introverts and are great speakers. It goes back to that, not concentrating on yourself and concentrating on the audience. So it's, an introvert will be, oh, don't look at me kind of thing, where you have to change that to, I'm seeing you as an audience. I have something to share. You've asked me to come to share this. Here I am. It's almost being in the mind of service and not on them. So it's not about, I mean, sometimes the extroverts can be the speakers that you don't really enjoy. They can be the ones that say, oh, I'm not nervous. I could speak forever. They're those, they go on and on. So, the extroverts have to oftentimes be brought back if they're extreme extroverts.
That's a good advice because I just recently was asked to give an hour-long presentation at a group I belong to, and somebody said, "Could you talk for a whole hour?" And I said, "I could talk for 4 hours." Maybe I have to stop and think about that. Maybe I'm too extroverted myself. But what the persons who maybe have tried this and maybe they were the person who stumbled over their words or did something embarrassing and they said, oh, never again. I'll never get up and speak in public again because I had this horrible experience. What kind of advice do you have for those people?
The same as with other things in life. If you fall off the bicycle, and say, I'm never going to ride again, you're going to miss out on some fun, right? If anything that we try and fail, if we don't try again, we might miss out on something. Like I said, I do believe if we're being asked to speak or we're being moved to speak, there's a reason for that, and we should pay attention and just create a new memory. Yeah, that was awful. You and I have both shared some experiences that we had, and we took those and made ourselves better and made ourselves more aware. How can we make sure that that doesn't happen again? So take it as a challenge, and just as a challenge to, I'm going to create a new memory, a good memory.
Great. I think that's so true that you have to just keep going no matter what. Um, the one thing that I wanted to just also, before we close up, I know we're running a little short in time here, but you mentioned about connecting with your audience. What advice do you have to try to find out who your audience is if you're not sure? Maybe you're giving a presentation to a group of people and you don't really know much about them. Are there any hints on trying to find out who your audience is before you're there so you can prepare for that.
You should always ask whoever invites you to speak questions, and they like it. They're not bothered by it. They're happy that you care that much. So if somebody asks you, I can't tell you how many times I hear clients or friends say they're speaking somewhere and I start asking questions about the audience and they don't know anything, or I say, is it a handheld mic? Is there a podium? Is it a lavalier? What? They don't know any of that. You should ask all those questions. What's the room set up? Tell me something about the makeup of the audience. What do you think they would benefit from the most in this area? And the physical setup. Is the mic connected to the lectern? Are you going to have to hold it? It doesn't mean that you can change it. You might be able to change it to what you prefer, but even if you can't, at least you're aware so you can prepare for that. I had a client that we went to see someone speak at this venue, and there was the mic was like a gooseneck mic. It was stable there, and the lectern was there so she could put her notes. And then my friend was asked to speak for the next month, and she assumed and didn't ask any questions. She assumed that was the setup. She stapled a couple of pages of her notes. Don't do that, by the way. She stapled a couple pages of her notes together, thinking that she was going to be able to put them on the platform. And she got there. There was no lectern, and it was a handheld mic. So here she's holding pages. She's here. She's trying to turn the page. It was a mess. And if she had just asked, that would have helped a lot. However, you do not have to know anything specific about the audience to connect to them. Another technique it changes everything for you is to make it about the audience as often as you can by using the word you, Y-O-U. When you're telling a personal story, you might use the word I 1,000 times, and that's okay. They're in the story, and it's about you, and they're connecting with you that way. But other than that, we have a lot of phrases that we use that are what we call clutter phrases that aren't necessary. I'm going to tell you a story. Just tell the story. Instead of saying, I'm going to teach you 3 techniques to improve your public speaking, I would say, you're going to learn 3 techniques to improve your public speaking. You're going to leave here today with 3 techniques. You're going to hear that they don't know it maybe consciously, but it lands on their ears differently. It's about them. And the real trick on this is to make it singular instead of plural. Don't say, do any of you get nervous when you're asked to speak? You say, do you get nervous when you're asked to speak? It's called look to all, but speak to one. So
Oh,
you're looking around the audience, but and that's when you walk away and say, I felt he or she was speaking just to me. Believe me, they use that technique. They were speaking just to you. It makes a huge difference.
this is such great advice. The one last thing that I'm kind of compelled to ask you is we probably all heard and probably attended speeches where we felt like we were suffering from death by PowerPoint. And and when I first started speaking, there was no PowerPoint. I had my little 3x5 file cards that I made notes on. And now when I do use PowerPoint, but I use it to give some bullet items. But I have attended sessions where both on Zoom and in person, where people are just reading their PowerPoint word for word. And I feel like just send me the PowerPoint. I don't need to sit here for an hour and hear you read it. So, what advice do you have for should we use PowerPoint? Shouldn't we use it? And how should we use it?
Yeah, I can't stand PowerPoint. It's supposed to be visual. The So a couple things. The person that you're talking about, when people use it to create, they use it as a crutch. They create their speech on PowerPoint. No, create your speech as if you're not going to have that, and then look to see what can I not explain thoroughly without this visual. what will enhance this presentation. But I've seen people not only have every word of their speech up there, but have cartoon figures or something, or they'll go, our team, and then there's a picture of people. It's like, we know what people are, you don't have to, it gets insulting. And certainly when it's all written out like that, people say that all the time. Just send it to me if you're going to read it to me. The for Connor, for instance, that I spoke about when he speaks, the only thing that goes up on that screen are videos of when he was in the Olympics, or uh, you know, some of the races, some of the things said after, but that's a visual. And I hear 1,000 times a year, I have to put the words up there for the visual people. I have to put this up there. Words on a slide are not visual. Words on a slide are auditory, because when you read a word, you're hearing it in your head. So when that person is talking and expounding on that point, it's competing voices, the voice in your head and their voice. And there's been studies done that show when there's words up here and the audience is facing you, they can't help, it's called task switching. They can't help but look at the words, go back to you, look at the words. So they're saying it in their head, go back to you, saying it in their head, go back. So they never are retaining all of what they're reading or all of what you're saying. So if you can do it with visuals and not, maybe graphs or something and not words, that is the best. You become your visual. You deliver it in a way that you're painting the picture. The stories you talked about, that's important. That is a visual. That's why people remember and connect with stories, because they can visualize it. But those words up there are not visual, and they really take away from it. If you have to do that, if you feel you have to do that, there's little tricks there too. Put the words up there, give them a minute to look at it, or if you refer to them, then black out the screen or have a holding slide while you expound. Then the attention's all on you again. And on Zoom too, if when somebody's using that, you can be lost. So I'm not sure how you do it, and there's some people use Teams and other things, so there's different ways to do it, but try to have the speaker's face enlarged, and if that could be all they see, but next to the slide is their face, so they can at least connect in that way. Because when there's all those faces and the speaker's not there, it's so weird to do. It's very hard to connect.
This has been some great advice, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And like I said, I do want to recommend Amy for anyone who wants to take her classes. We'll give you the links to that and also to that documentary, because it's just so powerful, and you can learn more about Amy and where she comes from, and what a success she's been from a rough start in her early life. But is there any final words that you'd like to share with us, Amy, before we close?
Well, Ralph Waldo Emerson has better words than I do, and he he said, "Do what you fear, and the death of fear is certain." So I encourage people, especially if you have a little bit of fear about that, but it's something you think you want to do, go for it. You'll be amazed, and a freedom will come that you won't believe.
Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. And like I said, everyone, look at Amy's courses. She also sends out a blog periodically. I'm not sure if it's weekly or not, but you can sign up for that, I'm sure, as well. So I want to thank Amy again, first of all, for her friendship over the years. And now I'm half a country away from her again, but we'll see each other soon, I hope. So
I,
thanks, Amy, for all your help.
thank you.